Okay. Hello and welcome to the parsha class, Parsha Beshalach 5785. I am pre-recording this class as I find myself on the East Coast, housed here in Beth Shalom, in the five towns, and just wanted to thank the shul for allowing me to give the class here. And much hatzlacha to the Rav and the administration here. They're doing great work here in Lawrence, New York. The parsha class source sheet, which can be found in the bottom, in the first comments of the video, right after the questions. It's going to be a little bit shorter of a class. I think I usually have 5, 6, sometimes 7 questions we try to answer. Today, we're going to try to stick to 4 questions, fundamental questions, and hopefully of interest and worthy of our time, and hopefully will give us all inspiration to live more fulfilling Torah lives dedicated to H-Shem. Now, the parsha Beshalach is a fundamental parsha. It is the event, the splitting of the sea, the bringing of the maan, the beginning of the sojourn in the desert, all leading up to the Jewish people receiving the Torah at Har Sinai in next week's parsha. Some fundamental ideas that we're going to encounter today, and I'm very excited to share some thoughts that I found on the parsha from different sources, as usual. Sometimes a simple source like Rashi, but it's not always so simple. And Baruch Hashem, there are commentaries that help enlighten us and help us understand the Torah better, and help understand Hashem's message for us in the Torah. So let's begin with the very beginning of the parsha. Pharaoh remembers and is upset by the fact that he had let the Jewish people go, and he then gets ready to chase after them. He meets them at the Sea of Reeds, not to be confused with the Red Sea, which is not a real thing. It's the Reed Sea. Somebody called it the Red Sea by accident. I think it was a typo of some sort. There's nothing red about the Reed Sea, and so the Sea of Reeds is the Red Sea, and as we'll get to more about that story when they catch up to them. But meanwhile, v'yugad lemelech Mitzrayim ki barach ha'am. It was told to him that the people ran away. Now remember, they had been asking, and we've seen in past years, we've seen Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky and Emet Yaakov discuss whether they were lying about it, or whether this was, they honestly only wanted 3 days. Give me just one moment. Hello, I'm giving the class. Everything okay? Pleasure. Bye-bye. Okay. So, sorry about that. So he's told that they left. They didn't just go for 3 days. They left. They're gone. What kind of gone? That kind of gone. V'hafech levav Paro v'avadav, and the hearts of Paro and his servants changed el ha'am regarding the people. V'yomru ma zot asinu. What did we do? It's actually fascinating how this is what Rabbi Yaakov talks about there. It's fascinating how quickly we forget, right? That these people were supposed to. These people were supposed to. They knew that they'd been harmed by the plagues and everything else. They had reason to let the Jewish people go. The 10th plague, Paro begged them to leave. They hurried them out, and now 3 days later, they forgot all about that. Right? What did we do? We let the Israel go from our servitude. Okay. Seemingly in an unrelated pasuk in Mishlei, chapter 19, verse 25. There's a verse that says, "Leitz takeh ufeti yarim," hit the clown, right? And the fool will become smart. V'chiach lenavon yavin dat. Give them proper rebuke, and the smart person becomes knowledgeable. Rashi says on that verse, and here we'll see how this is relevant. Lo takeh, elitz takeh peti yarim. That if you hit the clown, the fool will become wise, right? Well, yeah. So the Rashi says al makut paro, on the hitting of Paro, umemlechet Amalek, the hitting of Paro, in other words, the events of this week's parsha, where he is, where after the plagues, after now that he is going to be hurt in the Reed Sea, and then the war of Amalek, it happens at the end of this week's parsha. Hakim Yitro unitgayer. That's what caused Yitro to become wise and to convert, as is the opinion of good half of our commentaries, that Yitro converted to Judaism, and he is mentioned in next week's parsha. So all of that started from the events of this week's parsha. But this verse, according to Rashi, Leitz is referring to Paro. Leitz takeh, hitting the clown, the makot of Paro. So are we calling Paro a clown? Is that respectful? And more importantly, is that all he did? Was just entertain? He was juggling? You know, am I a clown to you? Am I funny? Right? You can picture him as Joe Pesci there for a second, right? So Paro is not funny. He's not a clown. He killed people. He bathed in baby's blood. You know, he drowned children. He's not a clown. He's a lot of things. I wouldn't call him a clown. Why are we being so I don't know, we're basically downgrading him. He's much worse than he's a tyrant, not a clown. So what's the connection between clowning around and what Paro did? And so for that we need the brilliant mind of Rav Avigdor Halevi Nebenzahl, the Rosh Yeshiva, former Rosh Yeshiva, I believe, of Hakotel. So he quotes, as you see, he quotes this verse in Mishlei. He has a whole essay really on leitzanut, on clowning and joking, right? And he quotes this verse, and he brings eventually. So let me try to find the place. So he brings. And he notes, by the way, that Rashi, this isn't the only place where Rashi says this. Rashi says in the beginning of next week's parsha, Yitro. What did Yitro hear? He heard about these events of what happened to Paro, what happened to Amalek. That's what caused Yitro to come to the Jewish people. Kriyat Yamsuf Malchemet Amalek. Right? So he continues, and this is just a piece of his essay. It's a beautiful, much longer piece, but he says, "Chayvim anu livar et inyan halitzanut kulo." We need to understand this whole concept of what it is to be a clown. B'darko shel Rabbeinu Yonah ve'em acharav, and then he quotes from Rabbeinu Yonah and Shari Tshuva, the third Shar 176, sorry. Basically, a late somebody who takes something serious and kicks it down several notches. and take an important subject and make it into nothingness. What we call irreverent, right? Irreverent humor, right? It comes from the idea of, right? Let's just break down the word not reverence, without respect, right? You're taking an important thing, something that people should take to heart, and you make it like it's not important. Uh, so and of course we have to understand that when that happens, besides what happens to a society, when you have this idea of not having important things, not having ethics, not having morals, not having definitions for things. Besides that, he there's no debate. There's nothing to talk about anymore. You can't have a civil conversation with somebody who doesn't take anything seriously, right? With the things you hold to be important are nothing to them. And that's kind of how Rabbeinu Yonah understands it in Sharei Teshuvah, but he also quotes the Ramchal of Moshe Chaim Luzzatto in Mesilat Yesharim, that has chapter 5, which also talks about serious things and about seriousness and again, lays out to this concept of clowning around. And he says, with one joke, says the Ramchal, with one joke, he knocks everything to the ground. Right? The most important thing in the world, love, affection, parenthood, like that, you can make it mean nothing. Most important ideas. Honesty. Like that. Just heard somebody tell me that she works in a place where there's a rabbi, let's call him a rabbi, who said to her that everybody cheats on their taxes. The only difference between people who get who are in prison and people who aren't is that they got caught. The person tells me that's that's not true. I mean, I know at least one person. Hey, me. I know some people pay their taxes. Some people do what they're supposed to do. Some people follow the laws of the land, as the Torah says to do, and some people don't. But things catch up to people when that kind of thing happens. But the idea is that in the same way that Pharaoh took human freedom and made it into a nothing, he interrupted the human normal lives, the family life of his slaves in a way that a person is not allowed to in any way. It's an area that nobody should be able to touch. So that same way that he did that, Amalek learned from that as well. And that's why Amalek chose to attack the Jewish people when? As they're leaving the Red Sea. As they're leaving, as their hopes are high, their inspiration is at the highest possible level. We've talked about this in previous classes. They were able to say, Zeh Keli V'Anvehu. They were able to point with their fingers and recognize God in this world, almost physical representation of H-Shem. And at that very point, when we should have been on a high, that's when they chose to attack, to try to bring us down a notch. Because again, they don't want things to be serious. A lot of people are like that. It's not that they want to be funny. It's actually the other way around. They're very serious about funny, right? They want things to be funny because they don't want anything to be serious. Because if things are serious, then they have responsibilities. And that might affect their lives in ways that they don't want. And so their solution is to make a mockery of everything. usually at least my experience, usually you see this in people who are not very mature, children, teenagers, right? You'll say something that's important to you, and they'll think it's a joke. They'll act like it's a joke. Oh, bedtime, ha ha ha. Who cares about that? Well, you should. It's not good for your health. Ah, health, ha ha ha. Who cares about that? Well, you should. It's going to affect you in 120 years, so, within the next 120 years. So all of this is important. There's the way Rabbeinu Yonah understands Leitzanut is there's a piece of gava, a sort of arrogance that the Litzan has, where what he or she thinks is more important than what's really important. And what's really important doesn't really matter. That's what Paro displayed. That's what Amalek copied. And that's what Yitro rejected. It was exactly that. When he came to join the Jewish people of all times, right before they received the Torah at Har Sinai, according to most opinions, what that means is that it was the rejection of exactly this minimizing of important ideas, this kind of you sarcasm, perhaps would be a good word for it. Parody, where you take things and make a mockery of them. So that's where that's exactly where Yitro found a way to part ways with his previous philosophy. He said that this is irreverent, and I want to be reverent. I want to care about something. I want to stand up for something, and it's the Torah that he stands up for, and that's ki ani hibadati et libo. Right? The lashon is H-Shem hardened Paro's heart. The way we can understand also the whole idea is from the word kaved, that he was too full of himself, too full of honor for himself, that he so that's why so that's why Paro did the things he did, and I strongly recommend that if you have an opportunity to take a look at least this section of the essay that's in the source sheet. And if you'd like, contact me. I'll try to get you the rest of the essay. It's quite a bit longer than this. This is just like a snippet of a very beautiful piece. Okay, let's go on from there. Shemot 15:17. So we're going to go a little bit further and get into the actual song of the sea, right? The Az Yashir. So the Jewish people were at the sea. It split. They went through. The Egyptians followed after them, and as they followed after them, the sea closed in and killed them all. Right? So, and then the Jewish people saw it, and they sang this powerful song that is so powerful, so meaningful, that the rabbis decided that even though we're afraid generally of adding things from the Torah into tefillah, to sort of, we don't want our daily prayer to sort of sound like our highlights, our top 10 favorite parts of the Torah. Nevertheless, this is part of our daily prayer. Az Yashir, it's said every single morning. 365 days of the solar year, we say Az Yashir, this beautiful song, and we spoke about different verses of it in previous classes. Worth looking at the playlist on our YouTube channel. Free plug. All right. But in chapter 15, verse 17, the verse says, Tiviemo v'tita emo, bahar nal halatcha, machon l'shivdecha pa'alta Hashem, mikdash Hashem konanu yadecha. Right? You will bring them and put them onto your mountain. that you, the place that you live, shiftacha, that you reside in, the sanctuary of Hashem, the holy place that you have established, kunanu yadecha, that you placed with your hand. So writes Rashi on the word tivi'emo. So he says, Nitnave Moshe, Shelo Yikanes le'eretz. This is our first, I think, that I can think of, our first reference to the idea that Moshe would not end up bringing the Jewish people into the Holy Land. He says, what did he say? He said, Tivi'emo, that you will bring them. You're going to plant them in the Holy Land. Not us, not me. So Rashi says this implies that either he mistakenly or whatever, through Nevuah maybe, said that he's not going to come, Lo namar tivi'enu, that you're going to bring us. And this is Rashi quoting the Gemara in Bava Batra, Kuf Yud Tet 119. Or actually, where's the Mechilta? Or the Mechilta? I don't know. In the Hebrew here it says Baba Batra. Here in the English it says Mechilta. I'm not sure. Maybe it's both. Okay. Either way, that's Rashi. The Beit HaLevi certainly thinks it's the Mechilta, the Midrash. Both. It is highly possible. There are many concurrent statements of the Midrash and the Talmud that are both equally valid. All right. Let's go on from there. The Beit HaLevi, Rav Yosef Dov Soloveitchik, writes like this. He quotes this Mechilta, that Rashi ostensibly quoted, and Perish Shenizraka Nevuah Befihem Shelo Mitkaven Dibnehem Yavo Velohem Ba'atzma. So it seems that Moshe has foretold that us and our children, we will not be brought in there. They will be brought in there. They. So it's even a bigger question. I was asking, it seems like he's pretty much predicting that he's not going to come in. Says the Beit HaLevi, no, he's predicting that the whole generation will be coming. And he's right. So, Amnam yesh lahavin mas varo hem b'amram lashon zeh v'anira dehem nitkavnu b'zeh lekavana acheret lo nitkayim kavanatam rak nitkayim b'nevuah zu shelo nitkavnu hem lo. So who is he talking about? About whom is he speaking when he says that Hashem is going to bring them? He's not talking about the group of people in front of us. That's us. He's not talking about himself. They will be brought. Who's them? Who are they? So in quotes to the Gemara Pesachim, the Second Pesachim, Daf Pei Zayin 87 there. Quotes Ita, it says, Lo Gal Yisrael, and this I underline, this is not the Gemara's underlining. The Lo Gal Yisrael El Bishvil Sheyitosfu Alehem. The only reason, the main reason for Galut, the main reason for our exile into foreign countries, foreign lands, the four corners of the world, is all about us inspiring people with our behavior to join us and become Jews also. There's a Hasidic, call it Kabbalistic idea of nitzotzot of Kedusha, of sparks of Kedusha that have been spread out, centered, of course, in the holy nation of Israel, but also spread out throughout the world. And it's our job to be spread along the world to find these, to do this, pardon the phrase, the Easter egg hunt. Really, of finding these nitzotos, finding these sparks and bringing them back to Judaism. This is not me. This is not an open invitation to proselytize or anything like that. That's elsewhere in the Gemara, not to do that for sure. But to behave as we should, be the kinds of Jews we're supposed to be, and that will pull the holy of the other nations towards the holiness of Hashem. That's the idea. Shneimar v'zarata li ba'artz klum adam zarea kur el hachnis b'ma korim. So Kavanah HaGemora, the intent of the Gemara is the afal gav the vadai hakalu yigil lahem avur chatam, even though obviously the Jewish people were sent into exile because of their poor behavior. Right? Rak shehaya yachol la'anish otam b'artza, but he really could have, if he wanted to, he could have let them stay in their own land and been long suffering there, as they were under the Greeks or many other nations who live in their own land technically, but are under a heavy hand of some oppressive regime. So that could have happened also, So that's, but the fact that we were sent to other lands, and that was the punishment. That didn't have to be the punishment. It could have been otherwise. There are lots of ways to punish. But the fact that exile is our punishment is a way to encourage us to bring these souls back to Judaism, where they belong. And he goes on to say later on in this piece, that's exactly the point of this phrase, that those souls, those people who will eventually convert to Judaism, those are the souls that this verse is referring to, that they will be brought. Them. He's talking about them, and we just talked about Yitro converting. So he's in that category. So Yitro and people like him who will just shine towards Judaism in that way, they are the ones that the Jewish people will bring into the umbrella of working under Hashem, being His servants, and they will be the ones that are brought to serve Hashem in the place that He has chosen, and that's the Rashi here. Let's go back to the Rashi. Rashi says that he had prophecy that it's not us that are going to be brought to Eretz Yisrael, it's them who are going to be brought. Who are them? It's Ruth, it's Yitro, it's all the famous, it's Unklus, all the famous converts in Jewish history that have changed the course of our really, it changed the whole course of our history. Those are those holy sparks that Moshe is speaking about here in this verse that we say every morning in Az Yashir. Let's go a little bit further. Again, Shemot 16, verse 8. So we've gone a little bit further. The Jewish people went into the desert, and now they're hungry. They're whatever food they had brought with them is more or less gone for all practical purposes, and they want to eat. So what are they going to do? What are they going to eat? So Hashem makes a miracle. We've again spoken about this in previous years. If you want to hear more about this in different contexts, by all means, check out the other videos. But it gives them something called maan. In English, it's called manna. Why? I don't know. Call it what you want, and it's still going to be manna. Either way, in Hebrew it's called maan, from the word man. What is it? It was a mystery what the food was. So it says, "Vir Moshe b'teit Hashem lachem be'erev basar le'echol v'lechem b'boker lisboa yishmo Hashem et lunotechem asher atem melinim alav v'natnu ma lo aleinu lunotechem ki al Hashem. So they've been complaining, and so it says Moshe to them, it's Hashem who gives you meat to eat at night, right, and bread to eat in the morning. This miraculous bread. Why are you complaining to us, to me and Aaron? Who are we? It's Hashem who bishmo Hashem at the Hashem hears you crying and complaining. Pray to Him. He hears what you're saying to Him. Why are you speaking to us? Not ma lo aleinu lunatechem ki al Hashem. Why are you directing your complaints to us? Complain to Hashem. He's the one who does this, not us. We're just a receptacle through which Hashem does His will. Rav Samson Raphael Hirsch, who was writing about 150 years ago, he dealt with a society in which there was quite a bit of, due to the Enlightenment and the Reform movement, there was a lot of talk about Moshe being the, let's call it, author of the Torah, which in a sense he is, right? We believe that he transcribed what Hashem told him, but if you're going to make Moshe into the, call it the author of the Torah, so it's his book and not Hashem's. If you're going to take the Hashem out of the story, as some people want to do at that time and probably still do today, so then you're stuck with a definition of Moshe, an understanding of Moshe as a very powerful, very, strict, tyrannical almost leader, right? So Rav Hirsch, in his commentary, quite often felt the need to defend Moshe and to explain what he really was based on the words in the Torah, not on our fantasy, our interesting ideas based on what we want the Torah to say, but what were the actual words in the Torah? So let's, for example, on this verse, Rav Hirsch says, these words, more than anything else, characterize the, quote, man Moshe. And there's, I guess, seems like there was a lot of writing then about this man, the biography of this man, this normal man. Yes, he was a normal man. It's one of his great parts, but there's more to him than that. He became much more than a regular man. So it says again, these words, more than anything else, characterize the man Moshe as anav me'od mikol ha'adam asher al pnei ha'adamah. The most, Hashem describes him. Hashem in His Torah describes Moshe in Bamidbar 12:3 as the most humble of all people. Bamidbar, easy to remember, 1, 2, 3, 12:3. Okay, remember that verse. That's the verse where Hashem goes on to praise Moshe. He claims nothing for himself, seeks no honor for himself. He does not stand up upon his own dignity and wants nothing but to be God's servant. Anyone else, had it been said of him as the prophet said of Moshe, Molech limin Moshe zroa tifarto, right? God's wondrous arm travels at Moshe's right side. In other words, almost everything Moshe wanted, Hashem did for him, as it says in Yeshayahu 63:12. And anybody else would have put himself upon a pedestal. At the very least, he would certainly have appropriated for himself some slight reflection of the blinding brilliance emanating from such a miracle. People of other faiths tell of miracle workers who provided the multitude with loaves and performed all sorts of wonders. But what is all that compared to providing for the nutritional needs of 2.5 million human souls for 40 years on their journey through the heart of the wilderness? Another person, even if of only slightly lesser stature than Moshe, would certainly have been unable to resist the temptation of basking in the glow of such divine glory. So here's Moshe again. He's the one bringing Hashem through Moshe is doing this, is providing these people with all this food, meat and the maan from heaven. Right? But Moshe doesn't say that. He says Hashem does this. Don't talk to me. Talk to Hashem. He's doing this. So says Rav Hirsch. Yet here we see that the man Moshe shrinks from assuming such glory. He is not content merely to point out to the people in passing, together with his brother, that their complaint is really against God and not against them, as they are just instruments in God's hand. Rather, he alone, Vayomer Moshe, reiterates this last point and addresses to the people a special demand. When God gives you meat to eat in the evening and bread in the morning to fill you up, when God hears your murmuring without any prior appeal to God on my part, then not only shall you behold Kvod Hashem, God's glory and greatness, but you shall also behold this truth. You stand directly under his providence. Moshe is not needed, not even as an intermediary. Moshe and Aaron are of no importance whatsoever to the people. They're not there. He diminishes himself as if he's not there. Indeed, the entire success of Moshe's mission hinges on the people recognizing that the mission is wholly the work of God himself and not at all the work of man. A passage such as Israel's passage to the desert, a Sabbath such as the Mosaic Sabbath, and what is more, Sabbath years, sabbatical years, like those later to be required by the Mosaic law, as well as many other institutions of this law, all these would not only be folly, but would actually be crimes where they ordained not by God, but by man. You're keeping people from making money. You're keeping people from eating. What kind of tyrant does that? It's not a tyrant. It's not a person making up these rules. It's Hashem. No man has the right to lead women and children into a barren desert. No man has the right to order a cessation of work for one day, let alone for a whole year periodically. If God had not ordained these laws, there would be, as the prophet put it, Chukim lo tovim umishpatim lo yichyu bahem. Rules that are not good and laws that you cannot live by. As our sages say in the Gemara in Sanhedrin 58b, coming up in Daf Yomi next week, God willing, Goy sheshabat chayev mita. A non-Jew, if a non-Jew makes it his duty to keep a Jewish Sabbath, he commits a serious crime. However, if commanded by God, if required by God as a sign of our unreserved recognition and trust, then what otherwise would be folly becomes the deepest wisdom. What otherwise would be considered a crime becomes the highest virtue befitting of man, and its unfulfillment is considered a denial of God and a dishonor to man. The foregoing points are especially significant for the institution of Shabbat, whose foundation was laid through the fall of the manna, which we witnessed, which was witnessed by the people of Israel for 40 years. More than any other mitzvah, Shabbat requires the unshakable conviction that God watches over the individual and over all the little but indispensable requirements of his daily livelihood and that of his family. Man can whisper all of his little wishes and worries directly to God. No intermediary or intercessor is necessary for God to take note of man's needs, be they great or small. Shabbat, as well as the Torah in its entirety, were destined to outlive Moshe. Hence the anxious concern of this man, Moshe. His whole desire was to diminish his own personality in the eyes of the people, to dispel the notion that he stood between the people and God. Moshe wished to be a man and no more, and this was his supreme greatness. We talk about Moshe so much, and yet we don't really understand how great he was. His greatness was in his desire not to be remembered as great. He did not want to be remembered as a peacekeeper. He did not want to be remembered as the person who gave the Torah to the Jewish people. Hashem gave the Torah to the Jewish people. Moshe was just the instrument. He was just the pen that wrote it down on the parchment, right? He was nothing more in his mind. And that's what he wants. That's what he says in this verse. And that's that's the message he wants us to carry with us in our learning of the Torah and our remembering. We don't do it because Moshe told us to do it. We do it because H-Shem tells us to do it. Tells us now, not 3,300 years ago. He's telling us now to do it. The people who want to make it Moshe's law, they want to take out the now part to make it an ancient thing. Oh, in ancient times, there was a group of people called the Hebrews, and they followed the Torah. Right? So, well, the Egyptian worshipped the lamb, the Judaic people of ancient Israel. That's it's hogwash. That's not how it happened. Hashem made all of these things happen. That's the whole point of this parsha. All the miracles of the parsha are all pointing to the direction of Hashem leads us in our lives today as he did back then. That's the only reason we have a history of any sort, is only to learn from there how Hashem deals with us in the present. The past is not the important thing. The present and the future are far more important. Okay, last piece for today, God willing. Contemporary of Rav Hirsch was the Malbim. Very similar styles, and I think I've mentioned before, I'm very curious. And maybe if I ever have free time, I'll try to make a more cogent study of this. But they have very, very similar ideas and similar constraints and challenges in their lives, both dealing with the reform movement and the Haskalah of their time, but from very different angles. And yet at the same time, like I said, very similar approaches in terms of using the grammar of the text itself to learn out important lessons. Definitely interesting if they ever communicated, or if anybody knows, or if anybody finds out if they ever communicated about each other to each other. I would be very curious to hear that. Anyway, back to this though. So the Jewish people complained; they wanted meat. This heavenly bread was not enough. They needed heavenly meat. And it says in chapter 16, verse 13 through 14, Vahi ba'erev, and it was evening, Vital haslav, and the slav appeared, the quail, right? Vatchas et hamachaneh, and they covered the camp. Uva boker haita shichvat hatal saviv lamachaneh, and in the morning there was dew that covered the camp. Vital shichvat hatal. V'ta'al shifat hatal, and when the dew went up, hine al pnei hamidbar dak mechuspas dak kekfor al haaretz. That's when there was a basically a kind of white substance like snow on the ground, more or less. And that's a description of that's the beginning of the description in the Torah of the okay. Right. Okay. So that's a description of the manna, or the beginning of the description of the manna as the Torah gives it. However, says the Malbim, he be'erev tal slav, hine po katuv sheshichvat ha'al v'haman haita saviv l'machane lo b'toch ha'machane perish u'parshat v'alotcha ktuv uveredet hatal al ha'machane laila yered haman alav. So in Parshat B'halotcha, in Bamidbar, when it describes the falling of the of the maan, it describes it differently. Here, we just had that where's the dew and where's the maan? The dew is on top of the maan, and when the dew comes off, then there's maan. And Bamidbar, what does it say? No, it says Yored Haman alav, that the man was laying on top of the dew. Now, by the way, there's a halachic thing we learn out from this, that when you make a bracha of hamotzi, especially on Shabbat, some people during the week as well, they make a point to make sure that the bread is covered on the bottom and on the top, as it seems like our verse is describing that either the tal was covered on top, the dew covered the man, or it was underneath it. And there are commentaries that say it was both. It was basically sandwiched in between the tal, in between the dew was this man sandwich, right? So that's how we cover. That's why we cover the bread and from the top and on the bottom. Okay, so there's that, but that's not what the Malbim is saying here. It says bevor sheyared al hamachane lo saviv hamachane. Po katuv v'tal shitfat hatal v'hine al pnei hamidbar shemavor shatal kisei ataman v'lo nira haman al ha'alta shitfat hatal v'sham katuv shaman yared al hatal nimtza haya megula rak shafa davar be'ed shiyared haslav sham davar me'ed shenafsik haslav. Shalakena tava tava al habasar ki be'echi yared haslav she'az alta haslav v'takes et hamachana. So you have to understand, we've got two different periods of our history being described here. Right here is at the beginning of our sojourn in the desert, and the man needed to fall, where people could get it. So which was a clean area. And that's why it had to fall outside the camp. However, you don't want your food just laying out outside the camp. First of all, there could be creatures who might want to eat it. There might be it might be dirty there. So how do we prevent that from happening? There's a layer of dew, and it sort of protects. I don't know how hygienically it protected it, but it protected the man from being covered in the dirt that it fell on top of. And when that dew lifted, that's when the people could find it. Sort of like opening up a package, right? They popped open the Pringles of the man. But then later on in the Bamidbar section, what's happening there? There's no slav. There's no quail just falling from the sky, and therefore the man could be directly in the camp. It wasn't all covered in quails all over the place. Now in the camp itself, you had plenty of open space, and that's why the dew could form a could cover the the other way around. So that's why the dew could land on the ground first, and then have the tal, then have the man on top of that, because we had inside this area back then, before that, lo haya efshar sheyared haman al hamachana. It was impossible for the tal for the man to fall in the camp. Shekol hamachana haya mechusa b'aslav. That whole camp was covered in slav, in the quails. Lachein yared haman saviv l'machana. If they put it all in context, this is what the great Torah leaders can do. Is that when they learn Torah, they're thinking only about Torah, right? So close your eyes. Imagine what this must have looked like. We've got dew, we've got man, we've got slav. it has to. They can't be all on top of each other. No one's going to want to eat that, right? V'sham shemidaber me'et shelo haya slav yared hatal v'aman al machane atzmo lo savim machane zeh chisron aleph shaya lahem al yidei haslav she'al yedo lo yared haman b'machane rach saviv alo. So when there wasn't Slav, when there wasn't this quail all over the place, that's when the maan could fall directly in the camp, and wouldn't have to worry about any other animals or anything, because at that point the clouds of glory were covering the camp, and there was no concern that other animals or dirt would get into the maan. So again, it's really a chesed of Hashem that he does these kinds of things. We don't necessarily deserve these miraculous loving actions from Hashem. The Jews complained about the maan, and then they got meat, and they complained about that, and there was too much meat and everything else, and we complain a lot. But Hashem loves us very much, and He takes good care of us. Once we begin to recognize that more, that's when we'll really be able to connect to the Zekeli V'Envehu and recognize Hashem's presence in this world as our ancestors did in the past, so that we would be able to recognize it similarly now in the present. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments down below. Take care.